They say there is no pain in this world greater than a parent burying their child. It is a violation of the natural order, a nightmare from which you are never supposed to wake up. I was standing in the freezing, relentless rain of a Chicago November, watching a small mahogany casket being lowered into the wet, churning dirt. My 6-year-old son, Leo, was inside, or that is what the world, the police, and my ex-husband told me. The priest was droning on, his voice battling the sound of the wind whipping through the cemetery trees. He said, "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust." I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump into that hole and tear the lid off the box just to see his face one last time. But I stood frozen, my limbs heavy, trapped in a paralysis of grief that felt like I was drowning on dry land. But then, just as the first shovel of dirt hit the wood with a hollow thud, a vibration buzzed against my hip. My phone. It was in my black trench coat pocket. I don't know why I looked at it. Maybe part of me was just desperate for a distraction, anything to pull my eyes away from that grave. I pulled it out, shielding the screen from the rain with my trembling hand. My heart didn't just stop, it plummeted into my stomach. It was a text message. It came from a number I didn't recognize, a jumble of digits that looked temporary. There was no greeting, no name, just 3 words that made the world tilt on its axis. "I'm still alive." I stared at the screen. The rain droplets distorted the letters, but I wiped them away, blinking furiously. "I'm still alive." I felt a wave of nausea, followed immediately by an electric shock of adrenaline that started in my spine and shot to my fingertips. Was this a cruel joke? A sick prank by some internet troll who saw the obituary? Or was I losing my mind? Hey guys, before I tell you how this text message unraveled a conspiracy that shattered my reality, I have a small request. If you believe in justice and fighting for the truth no matter the cost, please hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell. We are building a community here that looks out for each other, and sharing this video with a friend might just help someone else trust their instincts when it matters most. Now, let me tell you about the most terrifying 48 hours of my life. To understand why that text message was so impossible, you have to understand the week I had just lived through. I'm Sarah. Before all this, I was just a normal mom living in a suburb just outside of Chicago. One of those neighborhoods with manicured lawns, high property taxes, and neighbors who smile at you while judging your recycling bins. I was a graphic designer trying to rebuild my life after a divorce that had left me emotionally bankrupt. My ex-husband, Richard, was reason for the bankruptcy. Richard wasn't just a difficult man, he was a master manipulator. He came from old money, the kind of generational wealth that buys silence and political favors. To the outside world, he was Richard the philanthropist, the charming businessman who sat on charity boards and drove a pristine Porsche. But behind closed doors, he was a monster. He was a narcissist who viewed people as possessions, and he viewed our son, Leo, not as a child to be loved, but as a pawn to be used against me. We were in the middle of a custody battle that was more like a war. Richard didn't even like spending time with Leo. He didn't know his favorite color, didn't know he was afraid of the dark, didn't know he loved dinosaur nuggets, but he fought for full custody solely to punish me for leaving him. He used to whisper it to me during the court recess, leaning in close so his expensive cologne filled my nose. "I will take him away, Sarah. I will wipe you out of his memory. You'll never see him again." I thought he meant he would use his high-priced lawyers to bury me in legal fees. I was naive. 2 weeks ago, the judge, swayed by Richard's charm and donations to the local police fund, granted him a supervised weekend trip. Richard claimed he wanted to take Leo camping at a cabin near the Great Lakes to bond. I begged the judge not to allow it. I stood up in court, shaking, telling them Richard had never camped a day in his life. But they looked at me like I was just another hysterical, bitter ex-wife. 3 days into the trip, I got the call that stopped my life. The sheriff of the local county called me at 3 a.m. A boating accident. The waters of Lake Michigan were choppy. The boat had capsized. Richard had managed to swim to shore, hypothermic and in shock, but Leo was gone. They dragged the lake for 2 days. They found his life jacket. They found the boat. They never found his body. The authorities declared it a tragic drowning, citing the strong undercurrents that pull things down and never let them go. Richard played the grieving father perfectly on the evening news. I watched him, numb, as he squeezed out fake tears, wearing a black sweater, talking about his little angel. But I knew Richard. I knew he hated water. I knew he hated boats. The story didn't sit right in my gut, but grief is a heavy blanket. It suffocates your logic. Until that text message. Back in the cemetery, the service was ending. People were starting to disperse, opening their umbrellas, whispering their condolences. Richard was standing about 20 feet away from me, under a massive black canopy, shaking hands with the mayor. He looked composed, too composed. His hair was perfectly gelled, his suit tailored to perfection. He didn't look like a man who had just lost his child. He looked like a man closing a business deal. The rage hit me harder than the grief. I marched over to him, my heels sinking into the wet mud, not caring about the scene I was about to make. "Richard!" I screamed. The chatter of the crowd died instantly. He turned, his face shifting from polite somberness to annoyance. "Sarah," he said, his voice smooth and condescending. "Please, not now." I shoved my phone into his face. "Look at this! Look at what I just got!" He glanced at the screen, and for a split second, a microsecond, I saw his left eye twitch. It was his tell. It was what he did when he was caught in a lie. But he recovered instantly. He reached out and put a heavy hand on my shoulder, squeezing it hard enough to bruise. "Sarah," he announced, loud enough for the mayor and the gathered crowd to hear. "You're hysterical. It's grief. It's a spam bot or a troll playing a sick joke. Put the phone away. You are embarrassing Leo's memory." "It's not a bot," I yelled, pulling away from his grip. "Someone sent this. He says he's alive." Richard leaned in close, invading my personal space, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper that only I could hear. "You are making a fool of yourself. Everyone here thinks you've snapped. Go home, take a Xanax, and accept that he is gone. Stop looking for ghosts, Sarah. It's over." He signaled to his driver, turned his back on me, and walked away toward his waiting limousine. The crowd looked at me with pity. I could hear their whispers. "Poor Sarah, she's lost her mind. The grief broke her." I stood there in the rain, shaking, not from cold, but from fury. He dismissed it too quickly. He didn't ask to see the number. He didn't demand the police trace it. He just wanted me to shut up. I rushed to my car, my hands fumbling with the keys. I didn't go home to cry. I went home to war. I sat at my kitchen table, the house silent and empty. Leo's toys were still scattered in the living room. A half-finished Lego tower sat on the coffee table. I couldn't look at it. I tried calling the number from the text. It rang 3 times and then went to a voicemail, a generic robotic voice saying, "The subscriber is not available." I needed help, but I couldn't go to the local police. The chief of police was Richard's golf buddy. They spent every Sunday at the country club. If I went to them with a text message from a random number, they would call Richard. He would spin a story about my mental health, and they would have me committed for a psychiatric hold. I needed someone who knew Richard's dirty secrets, someone who hated him as much as I did. I thought of Maddie. Maddie was Richard's former executive assistant. She was a brilliant young woman, sharp as a tack, who had worked for him for 3 years. 6 months ago, Richard fired her abruptly for incompetence. But in this small town, rumors fly. The word on the street was that Maddie had stumbled upon some accounting files she wasn't supposed to see. I still had her number. I texted her. I know about Richard. I need help. It's about Leo. She replied instantly. Meet me at the diner on Route 9, the one with the broken neon sign. 30 minutes. I met her in the back booth. Maddie looked tired. She was wearing a hoodie and kept checking the door. When I showed her the text message, she didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with intensity. He's a monster, Sarah, Maddie said, her voice shaking slightly. She opened a laptop she had brought with her. He didn't fire me for incompetence. He fired me because I saw him moving liquid assets, massive amounts of cash. He was transferring millions to shell companies in the Cayman Islands. He was planning an exit strategy. But why? I asked, gripping my coffee cup. He has everything here. Status, money, power. Because he's in trouble, Maddie explained, typing furiously. The IRS is sniffing around his real estate deals. He's looking at federal prison time for fraud. He needed to disappear. But knowing Richard, he wouldn't just disappear alone. He views Leo as his property. He wouldn't leave his legacy behind with you. The text, I begged. Can you trace it? Please, Maddie. Maddie wasn't a hacker, but she was resourceful. It's a burner phone, she said, frowning at the screen. Untraceable carrier. But wait, she squinted. There's an attachment here, a file that didn't download fully because your service at the cemetery was probably bad. I didn't see an attachment, I said. It's just a fragment of data, Maddie said. She clicked a few keys. Let me try to force the download. A progress bar appeared. My breath caught in my throat. Loading. 100%. An image popped up on the screen. It was low quality, grainy, and dark. It looked like a photo taken by a child, blurry and angled toward the floor. It showed a wooden floorboard and the corner of a rug, but on the rug, lying on its side, was a toy. A small, stuffed blue dinosaur with one missing plastic eye. I gasped so loud the waitress looked over. That's Mr. Dino, I whispered, tears instantly blurring my vision. I put that in Leo's backpack before he left for the camping trip. Richard told the police the backpack was lost in the lake when the boat flipped. He's not in the lake, Maddie said, her voice hard. And look at the timestamp. This photo was taken 3 hours ago. Can you find the location? I asked, grabbing her arm. The GPS metadata wasn't wiped, Maddie said, her eyes widening. Richard is sloppy with tech. He thinks he's smarter than the machines. The coordinates aren't near the lake. They're 3 hours north, deep in the Manistitian National Forest. She pulled up a map. It pinpointed a location miles from the nearest main road. I recognize this address, Maddie said. It's a hunting lodge listed under a shell company called Obsidian Holdings. Richard owns Obsidian. He faked it, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. He faked Leo's death. He faked the accident. He's keeping him there until he can smuggle him out of the country. We have to go, Maddie said, slamming her laptop shut. I'm driving, I said. We jumped into my SUV. The storm had turned violent. The rain was coming down in sheets, making the highway look like a gray river. I drove way over the speed limit, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. If we call the cops now, Maddie shouted over the sound of the thunder, Richard has scanners, he has contacts. If he sees a squad car coming up that long driveway, he might run, or worse, he might hurt Leo to keep him quiet. We get Leo first, then we call the cavalry. The drive was agonizing. Every minute felt like an hour. We talked about Richard, peeling back the layers of his insanity. Maddie told me how he had been forging signatures for years. We were two women who had been victimized by the same man, now racing to stop him from the ultimate crime. About 2 hours into the drive, my phone rang. The screen displayed Richard. My stomach turned. Don't answer it, Maddie warned. I have to, I said. If I don't, he'll get suspicious. I put it on speaker. Hello? I tried to sound broken, like the grieving mother he thought I was. Sarah? Richard's voice filled the car. It was cold, devoid of the fake emotion he had shown at the funeral. I saw you leave the cemetery in a hurry, and I know you met with Maddie. I froze. He was having me watched. I don't know what you're talking about, I lied. Don't insult my intelligence, Sarah, he spat. You're making a mistake. You're chasing a fantasy. Maddie is a disgruntled employee feeding you lies. If you continue this, if you try to come find me, things will get messy. Do you understand? You should have just grieved. You could have been the sympathetic victim. Now you're becoming a liability. Where is my son, Richard? I screamed, dropping the act. Goodbye, Sarah. The line went dead. He knows, I yelled, slamming the steering wheel. He's going to run. Floor it, Maddie said, grabbing the dashboard handle. We're only 10 miles out. I pushed the accelerator. The engine roared. We turned off the highway onto a dirt logging road. The mud was thick and the car slid dangerously, but I didn't slow down. Branches whipped against the windows. We arrived at the coordinates just as the sun was setting, casting long, creepy shadows through the dense pine trees. It was a massive, isolated log cabin built like a fortress. A black SUV, Richard's off-the-books car, was parked near the back, trunk open. Lights were on inside. Park in the trees, Maddie instructed. Don't let him see the headlights. I killed the engine. The silence of the woods was terrifying. Stay here and call 911, I told Maddie. No way, she said, reaching under her seat and pulling out a heavy tire iron she had grabbed when we stopped for gas. I'm not letting you go in there alone with him. He's desperate. We crept up to the porch, avoiding the creaky steps. The rain masked the sound of our footsteps. I peered through the slat in the blinds of the front window. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. Inside, the living room was a mess of open suitcases, and there, sitting on a Persian rug, playing with the blue dinosaur, was Leo. He was alive. He looked confused, pale, and small, but he was physically okay. He wasn't wet, he wasn't hurt. He was just a little boy playing with his toy. Richard was pacing the room, shouting into a satellite phone, furiously throwing clothes into a bag. He had a gun tucked into the waistband of his jeans. I saw red. The fear vanished, replaced by a primal, maternal instinct that was pure violence. He has a gun, I whispered to Maddie. We need a distraction, she whispered back. Maddie ran to the side of the house where the SUV was parked. She smashed the tire iron against the SUV's window. Smash! The car alarm started blaring, echoing through the woods. Honk, honk, honk. Inside, Richard jumped. He pulled the gun and ran toward the back door to see what was happening. Now! I screamed. I grabbed a heavy ceramic flower pot from the porch and hurled it through the glass of the patio door. It shattered with a deafening crash. I burst into the room, stepping over the glass. Leo! I screamed. Leo looked up, his eyes widening. Mommy! Get to me, baby, run! Leo scrambled up and ran into my arms. I grabbed him, shielding his body with mine. Richard came sprinting back into the room, realizing he'd been tricked. When he saw me holding Leo, his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. You! He roared. He raised the gun. Don't you dare! I screamed, backing away toward the broken door. It's over, Richard. You ruined everything, he spat, taking a step closer. I was going to give him a life of kings, a life of freedom. You're condemning him to mediocrity with you. I'm condemning him to be loved, I yelled back. He lunged at us. He didn't fire the gun. Maybe he didn't want to risk hitting Leo, or maybe he was just too arrogant to think he needed it. He grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. I screamed, but I didn't let go of Leo. Suddenly, a blur of motion came from the hallway. Maddie. She had circled around and entered through the back door while Richard was distracted by me. She smashed the tire iron with all her might, aiming low. Crack! She hit Richard squarely in the knee. He howled in pain, his leg buckling under him. He hit the floor hard, the gun sliding across the wood. Go! Get out! Maddie screamed, standing over him, ready to swing again. I grabbed Leo's hand and we ran out into the rain, jumping off the porch, slipping in the mud. We made it to my car just as blue and red lights flooded the forest. Police! Federal agents! Drop the weapon! Maddie hadn't just called the local sheriff. On the drive up, she had called the FBI field office in Chicago, reporting a kidnapping across state lines and massive wire fraud. She knew exactly what keywords to use to get the feds involved. State troopers and FBI agents in tactical gear swarmed the cabin. I sat in my car, locking the doors, holding Leo so tight I could feel his heartbeat sinking with mine. He smelled like campfire smoke and fear, but he was warm. He was solid. He was here. They dragged Richard out in handcuffs. He was limping, mud covering his expensive clothes, screaming about his rights, screaming that I was crazy. But they had found the fake passports on the table. They found the cash. They found the tickets to the Cayman Islands. An agent came over to my car. She looked kind. "Ma'am, you're safe. He's secure." I broke down. For the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. Not tears of grief, but tears of relief. In the days that followed, the full truth came out. Richard had hired a professional diver to plant the life jacket and debris in the lake. He had kept Leo hidden in the basement of the cabin for 3 days, telling him that I had died in a car accident and that they had to run away to be safe from bad men. He had brainwashed my son to keep him quiet. That text message? It was a miracle. Richard had left his burner phone on the bathroom counter while he was taking a shower. Leo, bored and confused, had picked it up. He remembered my number because I had made him memorize it with a song when he was 4 years old. He didn't know how to type much, but he knew how to spell "I am alive." He saved his own life. The court case was swift and brutal, with Maddie's testimony on the financial fraud and the overwhelming evidence of kidnapping. Richard's high-priced lawyers couldn't save him. The judge, a different one this time, sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Leo is back home with me now. It hasn't been easy. He has nightmares. We both do. We go to therapy twice a week, and we are slowly rebuilding our sense of safety. We moved away from that toxic town, bought a small house near the ocean where the air is saltier and the neighbors mind their own business. I learned something vital that day, something I want you to take with you. Evil doesn't always look like a monster in a movie. Sometimes it looks like the person you promised to love forever. Sometimes it looks like the person you promised to love forever. But more importantly, I learned to trust my instincts. When the world tells you you're crazy, when they tell you to sit down and be quiet, listen to that voice in your gut. That voice is your soul trying to save you. And never underestimate the power of an ally, someone like Maddie, who's willing to stand in the storm with you. Maddie is actually my business partner now. We started a consulting firm helping women protect their digital privacy and secure their finances before leaving abusive relationships. We're turning our trauma into armor for others. So that's my story. It's a reminder to hold your loved ones close, memorize their phone numbers, and never let anyone gaslight you into doubting your own reality. If this story gave you chills, or if you're just glad Richard is rotting in a cell, please hit that like button and share this video. It helps the channel grow, but more importantly, it shares a lesson that might save a life. And let me know in the comments, have you ever had a gut feeling that turned out to be right? I read every single comment. Stay safe, stay alert, and trust yourselves. I'll see you in the next video.